I stepped into the cage for the first time and had my first amateur mixed martial arts fight. And honestly, it didn't go the way that I thought it would. I lost my first amateur MMA fight, but what I learned from that loss was honestly more valuable than what I could have possibly ever imagined. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Unshakable Growth. My name is Fortune and I am a business certified coach and an amateur mixed martial artist fighter and someone who's on a journey of self-mastery. What I learned from losing my first mixed martial arts fight has been life-changing for me. And today I'm going to share with you some of those lessons that I took away from that fight. The first lesson that I learned is that failure is the best teacher. Losing my first fight gave me the chance to go back and reflect and learn and grow, because walking into that octagon that night, fully expecting to win, but not coming out with a win and losing, forced me to have to go back and look at all the things I did right and look at all the things that I did wrong. And the interesting thing about that is the things that I did right were very easy to look at and to absorb. But the things that I did wrong, the things that I didn't do correctly, were the ones that were some of the toughest, because they exposed what I was lacking in mixed martial arts as far as technique goes, as far as all the different aspects of being a fully well-rounded fighter. So imagine if I had succeeded and I actually had won my first fight. Obviously, it would have been a good thing. I would have been happy. I would have learned and grown from it. But I would have never gone back and really audited myself and my training the way that I've done since that loss. Looking at everything from technique, everything from nutrition, from rest, from recovery, and starting to look at all the different holes that were in my fighting game. That piece for me has been the most valuable information that I could possibly ever get, because it's given me now a blueprint of what I need to work on in order to become a complete fighter in that cage. Reflecting back on that loss gave me some very useful information into the mental preparation that goes into fighting, and into the mental preparation that goes into training camp, and into the mental preparation that ultimately goes into that night when you walk into that octagon cage and they lock the door behind you, and then you face your opponent and have to now fight your opponent. The mindset and the way of thinking was something completely new to me, because walking into that octagon, I went from what I had been doing in training camp, sparring with my partners, kickboxing, wrestling, takedowns with my workout partners and my teammates, knowing that we were not really trying to hurt each other. That was very different from how it felt walking into that cage, because now that I had gotten into that cage, I realized that the person who was in front of me was looking to hurt me. And if I wanted to win that night, I had to be willing to engage and meet my opponent at that level. And it's almost animalistic in a way. There is that type of energy that you have to tap into in order to exchange fists with somebody else. So that was something that was completely new, and it was a very interesting experience for me, something that I grew out of, and now realizing that I'm able to channel sort of that inner aggression in a more controlled way to get an outcome, as opposed to not being in control of that. So that was very, very interesting. So to speak a little bit more about the experience in the cage, once you walk into that cage, they lock the door behind you, and really in my own experience, all I could focus on was my opponent, who was directly across from me in that octagon. And there was a referee in that octagon as well, but the crowd around completely disappeared to me. I couldn't really tell if they were cheering. I couldn't really hear them anymore because my senses were so sharpened to pay attention to my opponent. And I could hear everything my coach was saying right outside of the ring, and I could almost hear my opponent breathe, and that was it. That was it for 3 rounds. We went through that. And through that experience, I learned that failure is really a figment of our imagination. Failure is not actually something real, because when I was in that cage, I knew there was a chance that I was going to lose. There was a chance I would get knocked out. There was a chance I would get hurt. But at that moment, I was not afraid to fail. I was not afraid to fail at all. And even if I did, I was okay with that, because I was doing something that was completely against human nature. And that's confronting our fear and taking that head on, trying to come out on the other side. In that moment, I learned that we are all really afraid of nothing. We make up things that we are afraid of, and they feel so real to us. But in reality, the things around us are just the way they are. We make them scary. We make them fearful. We make things up to be so large and make ourselves feel incapable of actually conquering those things. And that experience, when the referee said to go and to start the fight, all sense of fear that I was feeling up until that point completely disappeared. And for me, it became hyper focused on just winning the fight. Which now leads me into lesson number 2, which is growth happens outside of your comfort zone. Stepping into that fight and into that octagon was something completely outside of my comfort zone. And especially since this was my first fight, there was nothing comfortable about it before the bell. There was nothing comfortable about it. And in fact, I was dreading it all the way up until the fight night. And through that experience of getting into that cage and going through that whole entire fight, I realized that some of the greatest things in life, some of the greatest lessons in life, truly are on the opposite side of fear. And in order for me to grow as a person, in order for me to grow as a man, I really have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, because staying within a comfortable zone, something I'm familiar with, something that's not challenging or might be a little bit challenging, but is not challenging enough to where I have to force myself to level up in many different areas, is really not going to grow me to the level that I want to be, especially being a high performer in all areas of life. I strive to be the best possible person I can be, whether it's in my job, whether it's in business, whether it's in mixed martial arts. I strive to be the absolute best I can in those areas. And that is going to come with confronting uncomfortable situations over and over and over and over again. And it really never gets any easier. But the more that I found that I started doing that, the more confidence that I had going into new territories, even though I'd never been in those territories before. But because I've had the experience of conquering a lot of uncomfortable situations, I feel more confident that I'll figure out a way to make it through this new thing that I'm going into. So going after uncomfortable situations requires courage. There's a level of courage that you need in order to start something that you're not comfortable with. And using fighting, for example, in order to step into that ring, to step into that octagon, you have to have the courage to take the next step, knowing that there's a possibility that unknown things are going to happen. So that courage to take that step into that ring is very critical, and developing that courage, in my experience, really comes from repetition of intentionally doing things that you're not comfortable doing. And over time, that builds courage. And by building courage, you now dip into confidence. Courage comes first, the courage to try, the courage to take that next step, the courage to walk into the ring. After that, I now needed to develop the confidence to trust in my training, the confidence to trust that my punches and my kicks and my wrestling are enough to win the fight, the confidence to trust in my defense, and the confidence to trust that what my coach was telling me, I'm able to execute that. And the only way I found to develop confidence is through repetition. I discovered that confidence is not something that you just get. You don't wake up one morning and say, today I'm going to be confident, and all of a sudden you're just confident in every single thing. Confidence is something that is built over time in increments. It's built by constantly chipping and chipping and chipping away at something that is uncomfortable, at something that is difficult, and having the courage to do that every single day until you start to feel confident that you are capable because you've seen yourself do something a lot. That is a lesson that I took out of this fight, that for me to become a good fighter, a confident fighter, I needed to get into those training sessions, those sparring sessions over and over and over and over again, and drill the same punches, the same kicks, the same wrestling over and over and over again until I was so sure that when I needed those techniques, I could pull them out with no problems at all. So that was a lesson that I learned from training for that fight. And in gaining that confidence, there is a level of risk that you have to take. And one of my favorite quotes by Rabbi Simeon Jacobson is that the greatest risk of all in your life is actually not taking any risk at all. And I've realized that over the course of my life, that by me not taking risks and trying to avoid risks and taking the safe route, I'm actually not really growing at the pace that I want to grow. And I'm not building that courage and that confidence to be able to do bigger and better things and accomplish some of the goals in my life. So being okay with risking getting hurt, risking losing, was something that I had to embrace. And that has taught me, not only in fighting, but also in my job, in my career, and also in entrepreneurship, that risk-taking is one of the most important parts of the game, that if you're striving to get any outcome that's remotely difficult or something that's very important, you're going to have to take the risk that you may or may not get that thing at that time, but you have to have the consistency, the courage, and the confidence to keep taking the risk. Lesson number 3 is that resilience is built in the comeback. So what do I mean by resilience? Resilience is the ability to bounce back from a loss, bounce back from a situation, bounce back from something that has put you down. And I like to refer it to as comeback power. Having the resilience or the comeback power has been something that I've been learning and going through a lot in the last month and a half. From losing my first fight, I actually found out that I lost a lot of confidence in my game, because losing that fight and looking at all the things I did wrong, I started getting in my head thoughts that I was not as good as I thought I was not as talented as I thought I was. Maybe my striking, my punching is not as good as I thought it was, and my wrestling and so forth. So those thoughts start to chip away at my confidence, and that shows in my training. My coaches can see it. My teammates can see it. When we go rounds, they can tell that I'm not as sharp as before, and I'm not throwing as fluid as before. So learning about resilience and really now starting to rewire my mind to get back into that mindset of trusting in my training, regaining that courage to step into that ring, and regaining that confidence that I had built over time, lost, now need to build again. Realize that the only way for me to do that is through the same formula. It's repetition. Going in and day out, having bad training days multiple times in a row, and being okay with understanding that eventually I'm going to start to figure it out and get right back to a more confident fighter. But the key is to not wallow in those bad days and not try to let those bad days define how all of your days are going to be like. And that is one of the hardest things to do, because I find that whenever I'm having a bad day, it almost feels like I'm going to have many more of them, and this is just how it is. But having that positive mind, that optimism, and that resilience, that comeback power has really been pivotal. And having a support system from the coaches and the teammates and everybody around me has been pivotal. So that was one of the biggest lessons that I ever learned. And I realized that resilience is about the comeback, not just about pushing through hard times, but it's about how hard you come back. If you enjoyed this episode, you're going to love my next video, where I dive into building mental toughness in the face of adversity. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.